Hey guys, I'm back in the garage today to add another installment in my big wall series. This time I'm going to talk about my big wall everyday carry. And so I'm going to go through all the stuff I usually have on my harness for big wall climbing and then show you how I like to rack up all the stuff on my harness and sort of my system for how it works. So starting with the harness, I like using an actual big wall style harness, especially since you do spend a lot of time sitting in it, either when you're climbing or especially when you're belaying. These harnesses also come with, well, this particular harness is the Black Diamond Big Gun and has 3 belay loops on either side, which are the 2 ones right here, and then this one at the top, which I actually really like the top one, and then one in the back, and then you also get your haul loop for hauling. So that gives you plenty of options for whatever you want to put on your harness. Moving over here to the other big wall type stuff, right now I've been using the Alpine Aiders. They're a little thin for full-on big wall climbing. I'm probably going to pick up a pair of more beefy Atriers soon, but these still get the job done, so I'm kind of not complaining. But this is like a 5 or 6 step Atrier or something like that. They do make them in the 8 and 10 step categories also. There may even be a 12 stepper out there, but you kind of don't really need those unless you're doing real intense aid climbing. And then on each of these blue things right here, I have my Metolius Easy Daisies. I like those more than daisy chains just because they're easier to work with, faster, and you can fine tune them a lot quicker. And then on those I have Wiregate oval carabiners. I've tried out a bunch of different beaners for aid climbing situations, but I really think the oval carabiners work the best. And just the space in the basket really helps when you have both the daisy and the Atrier, and I don't like putting extra carabiners in where I don't need to, especially since I already have enough extra carabiners on me. Going over to gloves, so I'll have a pair of gloves on my harness like I always do. Depending on what I'm doing though, I'll switch between these full finger gloves, which are good for rappelling and just a lot of rope work in general. And then I also have these half finger gloves, which I will use more for aid climbing than anything else, just to mainly protect the knuckles. These ones even have padding in the knuckles because your knuckles really get scratched up while aid climbing. Moving over to this stuff, this is my usual stuff that you'll see in my harness, rock climbing harness everyday carry. But there are a few things that I substituted out and a few things that I added in. So here's my usual setup for rappelling down: a double link sling and a hollow block. Those do come in handy, especially if you're just planning on fixing your lines and then coming back the next day. You need some way to rappel off, and if I can, I'll rappel with my ATC over a Gree because it is a bit nicer. Another thing that gets added on is a locking carabiner and a micro traction for hauling and mainly just hauling. I'm starting to carry this with me every time I go out actually because it is kind of a useful tool. Anchors, so I can switch between cord or slings. I just threw these down here for an example, my 2 quad slings. If I go to cord, I may use 7mm or 6mm depending on whatever. ATC, the slight change here is instead of having another locking carabiner with the ATC, I just have one locker because it's not likely that you'll be belaying your friend up from the bottom. They'll just be jugging the line that you fixed, so I just have a locker on it for whatever I need. Also a Gree with the locker, and then this is just the primary belay device on lead belays. You're just belaying for quite a while with extended amount of time for aiding, so it's just really nice to have that Gree. Depending on your partner or your team, you may want to go hands-free at some point to do whatever, and you are managing more things at the belay, and you're just overall more bored, so it's nice to have some backup versus a passive device. Going down to my lockers, I usually have my usual set of 4 right here. for free lockers. Only this time I substituted out, usually I use screw gate lockers, but I substituted out for two magnetrons here. These are triple action locking carabiners, and since it's aid climbing and I'm not going to be using gloves, or if I am, I'm using really thin fingered gloves. I find that with my weird shaped hands, my thumb is a little bit small. It's hard to operate these magnetrons with gloves on. Anything thicker than, you know, just like belay gloves. And so I tend to not use these in alpine or ice climbing or whatever. But for rock climbing, they work really well, and they're as secure as carabiners get. So I'll use these for specific things, usually fixing a line. I'll use a triple action locking carabiner because that's kind of an important piece. I also have this is my usual thing I carry around for rock stuff, is just a really big triple action locker. This is another magnetron, and I use this for a number of different things, again, more critical pieces. But it's just nice to have a few more lockers than you would bring for big wall climbing. I usually use this for rock guiding too, because it's nice to have 5 lockers for rock guiding, but that's not what this video is about. As far as the Fifi goes, this has there's a bit of debate on the internet about use of Fifis and whatnot. I think this actually comes in handy, especially when you're top stepping and have that piece right at your waist. It's just nice to use, and it could save you a bit of time. Sometimes I leave it behind, other times I bring it. So I guess it's not true everyday carry item, but I have been using it a lot lately, so I think it's good to include in the everyday carry item. The reason why I have this single quick draw here is because sometimes you want to use this versus the Fifi if you want a bit more reach in your step. And a lot of people are using that so much that other folks have gone strictly to only the quick draw, or like the sport draw, and leaving the Fifi behind. So sometimes I will substitute the Fifi hook out for the quick draw. However, usually when I do that, I already have the Fifi with me because I just use the quick draw for a few high steps. And then the final item that I always have on my harness are Jumars. This is a set of Jumars, right and left, as usual. I carry them with one single non-locker, and what I do is, after they're on the rope, the right one's always above the left one for me, and then I use the non-locker for clipping in right here for when I'm jugging a line, cleaning a pitch that my friend led. And then that's because this top one has to come off the rope all the time to clean gear, but this lower one never has to come off the rope. And so the idea there is that the carabiner clips into the speed hole, and then I can't accidentally dislodge this Jumar like I can for the top one. And then if I'm jugging like a line for a long ways, like the fixed lines at the start of the day, I'll just clip one of my lockers in the top right here, and then have a carabiner in both of the Jumars while I'm jugging up. But if I'm cleaning a pitch, then I will only clip this into the speed hole at the bottom. Okay, so here I am with my big wall harness on. What I'm going to talk about first is how I set up these things, because this is more or less the most complicated part. This is kind of a nice way to keep them all bundled up together, so that way it's in a small package. I just keep them on my sides like that, and I can walk to whatever, or while I'm getting all racked up at the start of the day. But essentially, what I do is I can unclip the handle, the whole ladder falls out, and then I'll pull out the Easy Daisy. There we go. First thing I set up is the Easy Daisy. A lot of big wall harnesses come with 2 gear loops, and this is one of the reasons why I really like using them, is so that way I can put one daisy on one loop and then put another daisy on the other. There we go. So that's all girth hitched into my belay loop. Other people like to girth hitch in through the 2 master points. That's perfectly fine too. This is just my preference. Helps keep the harness a little bit more neat. And then I'll clip the ladder back into the same carabiner so that way they're both on the same carabiner. Just clip that off to the side. Alright, so I went ahead and set up the other one now, and that's on the other belay loop. Clip it onto the gear loop right there, and so this setup is ready to go. I can easily unclip them, clip them into my piece, stand up on the ladder, pull on the daisy, and then move up. So as far as the Fifi hook goes, there's a lot of debate about this and a lot of personal preferences. Some people like putting them into both the master points. Other people like putting them on the belay loop. And it's all based on what distance you want the Fifi from your body. Me personally, I really like tucking it on the top part of the harness. Some people call this the swami, and that's it. And so that way I can just sit down into it. I think that this length is really nice. Now if I do want a longer length, then like I said before, I'll go to my sport draw, and instead of doing anything fancy with this, I'll just clip it into whatever belay loop I have. And you can see how that gives me a lot more reach, mainly when I'm top stepping. And so instead of being able to stand up only this high above my atrier, I can stand up this high, which allows a lot of extra reach. And as we know, that extra reach is key in big wall climbing. Moving on to my other stuff now, gloves. I don't really tend to use these gloves, so I clip them in that large place in the back. Same thing what I do with my other harness. Micro traction, if I'm not using it, then it's going into that large loop in the back. If I am using this, then that means that I have the haul line in it and I'm ready to take this up while I climb the next pitch. And so in that case, I'll just clip it to my haul loop on my harness. Yeah, and it'll already have the rope in there and it'll be ready to go, so I can just grab it, clip it onto the anchor, and start pulling rope through. This sort of stuff, this is all just stuff I'm not going to use unless I'm going down, so the very back part of my harness. Jumars, I sort of see these things as belay device type materials, and so what I do is I clip them onto the back right, where I tend to clip all of my belay devices to. ATC, that's another belay device, so that's going into the back right, and that's kind of where it just stays for the whole climb. Anchor materials, same as my other harness. I just clip them onto the back left and then forget about them until I need them. This carabiner I didn't mention before because I totally forgot about it, but this would be my rescue cord that I usually carry around with me. You can see it in all my other videos. I don't have the rescue cord right now because I actually had to leave it behind on a climb at a rappel station. So right now it's just a standard non-locker, but if I need to perform a rescue, then I'll have that. And since I have not planned to use it, it goes on the very back. Gree. Just like all the other belay devices, it goes right here. The thing with this one is you kind of use it a lot because you have it on your harness belaying your lead climber, and then it's also serving as your backup while you're jugging your line. So you tend to use this a whole lot. And so what I've started doing is instead of clipping it on the back right, I clip it onto this upper gear loop on the right. All right, so my big fat locker, which I'm not expecting to use, but I want with me, this is where I'm starting to use the upper gear loop on the left side. And so that's where it tends to go. I think it's really nice to have locking carabiners on these upper loops because it helps keep them out of the way of the mess on your bottom, on the bottom gear loops. And they're just really small so they don't tangle up with anything here. And you usually tend to need them even when you have a bunch of crap on you, so you can just take them off the top. Keep in mind in this situation, I'm not going to talk about racking up for big walling in this video, but I'm going to have these gear loops and then a fair amount of the back gear loops full of climbing gear. Quick draws, cams, other weird stuff like that. And then all that's left in my list are my my 4 locking carabiners. And so I would just clip these on the top loop just as well. Same thing with these 2 lockers. Clip those on the top loop, maybe on the left side, maybe on the right side or whatever. But yeah, just having those lockers on the top loops, and then I leave the bottom loops for longer things. So there you have it, guys. That's basically how I set up my harness for all the baseline stuff you need for big wall climbing. I got everything I need for just about every big wall I do. Maybe I will substitute some things in and out for other things, but this is how I like it set up.